Hi everyone, thanks so much for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff and I'll be your host for the show. Before we bring on tonight's guest, if you've had a Dogman encounter and would like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you. If you've had a Sasquatch sighting and would like to be a guest on Bigfoot Eyewitness Radio, please go to bigfooteyewitness.com and submit a report. All right, let's bring on tonight's guest. Tonight's guest was featured on episode 309 not that long ago. On that show, he came on and told us about encounters he's been having with Dogmen in Estes Park, Colorado. Unfortunately, not too long after that episode aired, more experiences with them started happening. And that's what he's come back to talk about. Of course, I'm talking about Matt. Matt, welcome back.
Thanks, Vic. Happy to be back. Sorry it's under these circumstances, but good to talk to you again.
Well, it's great talking to you, too. I just hate the circumstances that are bringing you back on. I was hoping that after episode 309 aired, that would be it. You wouldn't have any more experiences with Dogmen, but unfortunately, sometimes that's not how it works out. But having said that, Matt, as we've already established, you're featured on episode 309. For the listeners who haven't listened to that show yet, please tell them about yourself.
Okay, I'm 28 years old. I'm a father, husband. I'm a mechanic professionally. Family is got some pretty deep roots here in Colorado. Initially landed here pre-1870, so before it was even a state. And then my family was pretty integral in the foundation of the town of Estes Park specifically. And we've been really involved in the community there. And we spend a lot of time in the outdoors, especially now that I've got a couple little ones. Wife and I like to camp every chance we get. We, up until recently, have utilized my family's property up in Estes Park that I spoke of on the previous episode. But since all this has been going on, it's a little bit less enjoyable and a whole lot more stressful. Just to even try and do a weekend outing like we used to.
Well, I can understand why it would be less enjoyable. Now that you've told anyone who missed that show about yourself, please give them a rundown on what you told us about in that episode.
Okay. I had I would say pretty terrifying first encounter with the Dogman. I had no idea that they even existed. I thought it was kind of the stuff of fairy tales up until that point, but I was sitting alone kind of late at night at the kitchen table there in my family's house and got the distinct feeling that I was being watched after some movement had gone, off to my right, up on the back side of the house. And I investigated it, somewhat, didn't see anything, still felt like I was being watched. So I moved what I was doing into the living room, sitting on, the opposite side of a high back couch. And time went by and I, dozed off, got pretty late. I woke up kind of with a start to seeing a silhouette in the window behind me. And that silhouette, it was startling. I didn't put it together at the time, obviously, but way taller than a human could have been standing there, way broader than a human, but face pressed up against the glass, fingers drumming against the window, kind of like, hey, look at me. So I stand up, run over, throw the door open after stumbling my way across the living room, and whatever it was gone. So went back inside, kind of investigated as best I could after doing a perimeter check and not seeing anything. I don't know, calmed down, tried to at least. About 30, 40 minutes after that, I'm getting ready to put myself to sleep, and I step outside, notice that things are eerily quiet like I had never heard on the hillside there before. Lots of wildlife all the time, everything from, little ground squirrels to owls and elk and deer, and there's basically never a time when it's silent, dead, like pin drop silent. So while I'm sitting there puzzling as to why it was so quiet, I hear heavy footsteps on the gravel driveway below me. So I ran down as quietly as possible. I ran probably isn't the best way to put it. I crept down as quietly as I possibly could. One of the last steps made a loud noise, and what I didn't know at that time, but a dogman then growled and took off running after I had gotten all my way back up to the top of the staircase and tried to make some noise. I figured maybe bear or coyote or some sort of regular wild animal that I'd encountered previously, and just trying to scare it away. The size, the speed, the weight that I could feel it through the ground, just it scared me in a way that I'd never been scared by wildlife before. So I made sure that I had every single door and window locked tight and did my best to try and go to sleep. What happened thereafter was probably, up until that point, one of the most terrifying experiences that I'd ever gone through. I wake up and hear my oldest daughter in the room just around the corner from ours. And she says that in her half awake kind of, I don't know, stupor, I guess would be a good word to call it, that there was Randall, a werewolf character from a cartoon movie that she likes, sitting outside the window and wanting her to come and play. And that just, that kind of put hair on end for me. So I looked out the window, and standing there in all its terrifying glory was at least 8-9 foot tall, super broad shouldered, yellow-eyed dogman, staring back through the cracks in the curtains at me. I froze, as I think anybody would, quickly trying to figure out, okay, what should I do here? And had a pistol, on me, as I always do. And as I went to reach for it or grab for it, I heard a growl. But at the same time, my youngest, we have a baby, just over 13 months now, started crying, and the dogman's head snapped toward the direction of where the sound is coming from, where my room is with my wife, and it starts running around the corner. So I scoop up my daughter, rush through the door, throw her onto the bed, and muscle memory brought the pistol out and presented it. And at that point in time, it sort of crouched. I can see it from top of its head down to almost the bottom of its feet from the vantage point I'm at. And as I bring the pistol out, it roars at that point then, and then launches itself up the hillside, tearing off faster again than any animal I'd ever seen. My wife wakes up, obviously startled as to why I'm standing, shaking in our bedroom, pointing a gun out the window. She hadn't seen anything, just heard some stuff at that point. And I told her, just go back to sleep. It's going to be okay. There was an animal. I'm going to go check it out. And I grabbed our Henry 4570 and went up on the roof and waited for, I guess you could say, the expected battle or attack that this menacing creature was, in my mind, sure to bring back. So at that point, I thought, okay, chance encounter. Most wild animals, especially predators, once they see that there's a person or people in their habitat area, they avoid you. But unfortunately, that is not the case in our particular situation.
Unfortunately, it's not. After that show aired, I gave you a piece of advice to try and help you deal with that dogman problem. When you acted on that advice, though, things didn't exactly go as planned. Please expand on that for us.
In one of the conversations that we had, you mentioned that one of the things that has seemed to be a deterrent for dogmen returning is setting up some sort of camera system, whether it's recording and saving or not, just having the potential for their image to be captured. They're camera shy, so to speak. And so we did that. We bought a real cheap, probably at this point severely outdated camera system from a shop up there in town and set it up. Initially there in late June, it did give us a little bit of a reprieve just because, as you said, it seems like they're camera shy for whatever reason. They don't want their image captured. So after setting all that up, we had essentially an uneventful non-contact weekend where we were able to enjoy the property, have the kids outside, have our barbecues, do what we normally do. And that kind of gave me this false sense of security where, okay, this was a really unfortunate couple series of events here where I'm coming in contact with this thing. And at the time I didn't know, but my mom, she'd also come in contact with it. But I think probably about a week or so after that, or possibly during that week between weekends, my mom, being semi-retired at this point, she spends a lot of time there and she's cleaning, dusting, things like that. And she went so far as to try and clean in and around where the cameras were, where they're mounted inside. And it got knocked either out of focus where I had them pointed, or in a couple of cases, about, I think it was 3 out of the 6 or so cameras that we have just were completely offline because of how finicky the audio visual connection on the backside of them were. So that night, or the next night that I was up there with my family, we had another series of encounters, I guess you could say. It started that evening. I think it was a little bit after 2:00. I hear the one that I've dubbed the Grinch, the one who I had seen previously, the large male, confirmation through seeing body parts, but I hear him at the window directly behind me. And again, because of your advice and speaking to you, I'm doing my best to just ignore it. Feeding into their desire to scare the daylights out of you is kind of your best weapon, as you described it, where if you don't give them the reaction they're looking for, eventually they'll move on because it isn't exciting, or they're not getting their jollies the same way that they would if you were petrified and screaming at the top of your lungs. So the routine that this guy is sort of established is he'll come to the window that's closest to me and starts quietly tapping on the glass. If that doesn't wake me, then scratching on the glass. And if that doesn't wake me or get the reaction that he's looking for, he then goes to knocking against the side of the house, starting fairly quiet, up to full on hitting, winding up and smacking the side of the house to try and scare me, essentially. And all throughout this time, I'm doing my best, just ignore it, try and go back to sleep. In our room, because we sleep with our baby up there, we have a white noise machine that we keep turned up pretty loud. So luckily my wife wasn't involved at this point, but I hear through the wall, because they're old and basically no insulation, I hear my oldest, Abby, talking like full conversationally, like through the wall. And this is a red flag, because I know that I have a Dogman immediately behind me doing his very best to scare me, but previously was trying to interact with my daughter in a way that I felt was incredibly threatening. So I get out of bed, all while keeping my back, turn to the large Dogman that I feel is just there to try and get a rise. And I walk into the bedroom where my daughter's sleeping, and she's out of her bed, standing facing the window that's in her room that faces east, and she's talking through the window to a completely different Dogman, one that I hadn't seen up to this point. This one I got a little bit better look at this time, because it was pretty close to a full moon, and immediately around the house there isn't a whole lot of shade or trees, so in the moonlight I can see super dark, basically black fur, similar kind of head shape, except the snout isn't quite as pronounced, isn't quite as long. Kind of, if I were to make a distinction or draw a similarity to something that people might know, the difference with the first one being more German Shepherd, almost wolf-like shaped face, as compared to the second one. Probably, I wouldn't go so far as bulldog, but definitely pit bull, shorter face, not smashed up and wrinkly, but definitely not the same long, pronounced snout. And same yellowish, goldish, amber eyes that seem like day glow, just glowing all on their own. And as quickly as I look up and see the eyes and see the shape and see what it is that she's talking to, I power walk over to her, snatch her back from the window, put her back in her bed, and I'm terrified. Obviously, I don't think anybody can go through close encounters like this, especially happening upon one that is unknown up until this point, and kind of, it seems like, in cahoots with the motivation of the first. So I put her down. I walk back over to the window, draw the curtains closed, and like put a clothespin on it so I can make sure that they're closed. It can't see in, she can't see out. Hopefully this, again, will dissuade them. They're not going to get the reaction. They're not going to get whatever their goal is if they can't see in to gesture or communicate however they have been with my daughter. The next morning I woke up, and this is when I found out that the cameras had been knocked out of either frame or focus, or completely knocked offline entirely. I went and I checked our monitor, and there were a couple of them, like I said, that were just completely dead. So I was like, okay, that makes sense. I'll put everything back the way that it was. I'll get everything readjusted, and it'll go back to being peaceful, and we won't have to worry about it. Well, wrong. Couldn't have been more wrong. The next night after that, it started what I'm kind of sort of calling their new routine, where instead of coming directly to the window and trying to do the direct intimidation, I guess I would say, of me, they're running around the house, knocking against the walls, scratching along the windows, and you can hear their footsteps as they're going, because these things are heavy, or at very least they move with a lot of speed. So you can hear the footsteps, you can hear them as they're dragging their hand along the side of the house, smacking the house, throwing rocks. Just a general terror campaign, if I had to put a name to it. And I didn't sleep, needless to say. When you've got alpha predators, I guess would be the best way to put it, right outside your house, and they're showing a level of intelligence that I didn't know was possible in wild animals. And they seem to just be motivated by trying to scare you to death, or to get you in a position where they can make you feel powerless and like a wounded little bunny rabbit kind of deal. It's difficult to find any peace or solace, which is kind of the whole point of going to this property of ours. The Denver area has gotten so populated, and it's more like a big city now, so getting away and getting into the mountains is half the allure. At that point, I wake up, or get out of bed. I shouldn't say wake up. I didn't really sleep. And I'm sitting there on the edge of the bed, and my wife, she tells me this is a situation where we have to now go to your parents, and we have to figure out what we're going to do about this, because she's seen them, not as clearly or, full frontal type view, but as they're running past the windows, she can see the silhouette, because we have sort of sheer curtains in our room, and they're fast, so you don't get a real good view, but she sees something very large run past, and a couple seconds later, another one slightly smaller run past, and they're taking turns terrorizing us. So we kind of have a little bit of a family meeting, and we're all sitting there at the kitchen table, dining table, and it's whatever kind of conversation throughout life you have with your parents that can be awkward. I don't think anything really holds a flame to, hey, Mom, what are we going to do about this Dogman problem? Because, again, you're dealing with something that, you're told both by popular culture and popular science, for lack of a better term, that this doesn't exist. It isn't real. It's things of fantasy. And I didn't know that my mom, like I said previously, I didn't know that she had gotten such an up close and personal view of these things, just that she had seen kind of off in the distance. So I started off, hey, those wolf things are back. They were making noise all night. I don't know if you heard it. My mom, yep, we heard it. It's kind of a nuisance. We're not able to rest. So what should we do about this? And as we're going back and forth, kind of spitballing ideas, her husband, my stepdad, he's rolling his eyes and oh, you guys you're letting your imagination get the best of you. You're seeing something that you want to see. You're misidentifying, a bear or a wolf or something that has moved territory because of lack of people at the beginning of COVID-19, and then now that things are opening back up, people are back, so they're kind of confused about where their territory is, or trying to give all the most, I guess, mainstream or logical explanation for what it is that we're experiencing and what it is that we're seeing. And this is when my mom shares her first up close and personal encounter that she had, where she's sitting out we have a flagstone porch, probably about 25, 30 feet from the house, that sits underneath a big old ponderosa pine. And she's sitting out there real early morning, pre-dawn, getting ready to go on a long mountain bike ride. She's just drinking her coffee, waking up, and she sees the big one kind of peering around a tree, growling at her from, she said, about 30, 40 feet away. And she stands up and kind of, squints and looks the best that she can. It's pre-dawn, so not super bright, but she can make out the head, the ears, the hand. And that's what she said that really stuck out to me. It wasn't a paw. It wasn't claws. It was a hand. So my ears perked up. I knew, hey, you're seeing what I'm seeing. We're on the same page here. At that point in time, after she stood up and kind of crept towards the edge of this little porch that we have, she hears shuffling behind her, and up on a big boulder that we have that kind of sits about 10 feet back, but between her and the house at this point, the darker colored one is perched up on top of the rock, and she said, smiling from ear to ear, like, I'm going to get you, ha, ha, ha. And she screams, throws her coffee cup, and runs as fast as she can into the house. She said it jumps off the rock, and in her words, I ran fast enough that I just got away, which, judging by the research I've done into this stuff, the other episodes that I've listened to from your channel, Vic, these things can move as fast or as slow as they want to. They can do anything they want physically. So if you get away, basically there's no outrunning them. If you got into the house, it wanted you to get into the house. If you got away, it wanted you to get away. The goal wasn't to, quote unquote, get you. The goal was to scare the daylights out of you. And even after sharing this story, my stepdad, he's still, he's skeptical. And I think that's probably a nice word to call it, because over the weeks, him not seeing these things for himself, just, sort of hearing noises in the house, he thinks that it's just regular bears or wolves or coyotes or something. And he started getting kind of rude or borderline cruel with some of the stuff he would say, and like teasing my mom and teasing me, and oh, hey, G.I. Joe, you're gonna strap on the rifle and go battle the werewolves again tonight? Hey, Van Helsing, don't forget your crossbow. That kind of stuff that it's uncalled for. It's clearly frightening for us to be dealing with this, and even if you don't buy it, or even if you haven't seen it, or even if you don't believe it, why be cruel? Why be mean? I just made no sense. So that sort of routine where they're running around the house, throwing rocks, banging on windows, it goes on for the rest of that weekend. And I kind of, on the drive home with my wife, we're talking about it quietly back and forth while the kids are sleeping in the back seat. Like, we don't want to go back up anymore. We don't want to use this property because we don't feel that our kids are safe, that we're safe, that there's anything that we can do to reclaim what we have. We thought that the cameras really worked because of that initial piece of success, but once I guess the limitations of the system were exposed, it's almost like they don't even care that it's there now at this point. So a couple weeks go by, and like I said, we'd essentially sworn off going back. We didn't want to. I'd been pretty well convinced that, if at any point in time one of these things wanted to break through the wall or break through the window and snatch away our daughter, which they seem to have a really keen interest in for whatever reason, there would be nothing that I could do. I wouldn't be able to react fast enough, and that sort of helplessness, for lack of a better term, really kind of, got to me. As I said in the first episode, with a fair amount of emotion, I think understandably, your job as a father is to protect your kids, and feeling like there's nothing that I can do to protect them except for keep them separate from these things, I felt that was the best course of action. So coincidentally, at the same time, or concurrently, I ended up getting let go from the job that I was working at because of the economy going down because of COVID-19, and not having the same caliber of employment available to me. We kind of, well, it's probably for the best. We can't really afford a vacation because, even though we have lodging paid for when we're up there, we usually go out and get some food or go downtown and get some ice cream, play miniature golf, whatever the case is, kind of touristy stuff for the kids. And good excuse, or used it as an excuse to just kind of stay away. It was about a week and a half, 2 weeks after I got the news that I was getting laid off that my mom gave me a call, and she said that her seeing these things hadn't gotten any better. In fact, it was worse. There was a night where she was awoken basically by the same routine with the tapping on the glass and the banging on the wall, but where her room is set up, because the house is set into the hill, it would be on what is the second story. And there's just a real narrow piece of roof, and then it drops down to the gravel driveway a good 12 feet. And her window, I guess you'd say, is probably about 25, 30 feet off the ground. And the smaller, darker colored one is standing there with its hands on the edge of the windowsill, breathing heavily, nostrils flaring, window fogging up, teeth bared. She screams, runs out, goes into the bathroom, shuts the door, and she said she spent the rest of the night in the bathroom because she could hear banging against the window, banging against the walls, and understandably terrified. My stepdad is still fully employed, so there's a lot of points in time where she's up there by herself, during the week especially, and understandably, she felt vulnerable. So, as I mentioned in the first episode that I did with you, Vic, there was a letter that was mailed out to the property owners in our little area that there was sightings of a large predator that had taken a couple of elk in a really violent way, and to keep children and small animals close to the house, avoid being out and about by yourself dusk to dawn, that kind of thing. So she thought, hey, the National Park Service, they're aware that there's something going on with the wildlife, so I'll give them a call, see what they can do to help. So she calls them, and she, again, not wanting to sound bonkers or be getting a one-way ticket to a padded cell, she's using really vague terminology, large wolf-like thing, large coyote, vague language to try and say that we've got whatever this large predator you had spoken of, it's on our property. It's coming very close to the house. It's coming right up to windows. It's making it to where we're scared to go outside, scared to use our property, scared to enjoy our home. So that week, the National Park Service sent out some of the people that they have who are kind of the predator specialists, mitigation, that kind of thing, where they're used to dealing with like campsites where bears are encroaching, or even though they're pretty rare, wild animal attacks, that kind of thing. So they come out to the house, and pair of guys, young guy and a little bit older guy, and they set up a bunch of traps, coyote traps, what looks like a bear trap, but a little bit smaller, and just kind of place them here and there in the areas where they say that if a wolf or a large coyote is going to be walking through to come up to the house, this is where the path that they'll take, so to speak. So she feels at that time, and I think it would be understandable to feel this way, that yay, the problem's solved. They're going to be walking along, they're going to catch one of these things on their foot, and they're going to run away and never want to come back. Wrong, again. Probably about mid-July at that point, after her telling me that, they put out traps, they came up, they said that they didn't see a whole lot of sign of wolves or coyotes, that they could definitively say this is where they're living, this is how they're coming in, that kind of thing. I sort of felt, okay, maybe they're moving on. Maybe it's a good time to go back up and try for another visit. So load up the kids, load up the car, head on up on a Friday. So normal evening, nothing of consequence on that night. About 2:00, kind of right on as clockwork, I hear the tapping, banging, scratching, and I'm thinking, okay, that was a waste of resources. They didn't do anything. This is miserable. But I hear something that puts the hair on the back of my neck straight up, and my stomach drops. My oldest, Abby, is out of her bed, and she's walking down the hallway by herself, middle of the night, pitch black in the house, kind of down the hall and making the corner toward where the kitchen back door area is. So I quickly get up, grab the pistol, grab the flashlight, and I'm as quietly as I can, but still jogging to catch up with her. I round the corner into the kitchen, and I see her trying to unlock the back door. At this point in time, she'd undone the knob lock. She was trying to undo the deadbolt. And it's an old house, as I've said many times, so the door frames don't sit quite level. And even though it's a new door, it's difficult even for me without pushing up against the door to get the deadbolt unlocked when I'm trying. So she's not able to get that unlocked, but she's repeatedly trying to undo the deadbolt. So I shine the flashlight on the back of her head, and she doesn't respond, which is odd. And the light from the flashlight catches the lower leg and sort of thigh area of the darker colored Dogman, the smaller one, probably about 10 feet back from the door, behind a little patch of willows that kind of separate this little corner courtyard thing that we have off our back door. So again, as before, what she's calling Randall, one of these dogmen, is somehow communicated to her, I want you to come outside, you should come outside, come out and play, whatever it is. And she's now gone from hearing it or experiencing it in her room and talking to them through the window to now she's actively trying to get herself outside where these things are. And it's terrifying, doesn't do it justice. The thought of waking up in the morning, door wide open, and my child is nowhere to be found, it's nightmare fuel. It's the stuff that every single parent dreads from the moment your child is born, that one day they'll just be missing and you don't know why or how. So I come up behind her and I grab her by the shoulder, and what really threw up some red flags is it seemed like when I grabbed a hold of her shoulder, she wasn't really awake until I did that. She blinked her eyes a whole bunch of times, kind of looked her around, not realizing where she was, and she asked, Daddy, we're in the kitchen? And I'm, Abigail, what are you doing? Why are you trying to go outside? We've talked about this. You know that these things are dangerous. You can't go play with them. And I'm picking her up and walking her away from the door at this point. and she immediately falls back asleep. So it was almost as if she was sleepwalking or like trance-like state. Because I mean, her eyes were open. I could see that from the angle that I had when I first came up behind her, but she wasn't consciously aware of where she was and what she was doing until I grabbed her, spun her around, and picked her up. So again, red flags, huge question marks. What the heck is going on here? Number one, how are these things communicating to her? Come outside. Number two, she's not conscious of the fact that she's trying to go outside. And number three, we've had conversation after conversation, and when she's awake, when she's conscious and coherent, she'll tell you all day long, we don't go outside at night. We don't go outside and try and play with animals. We don't go outside and try and play with Randall. He's not nice. He does not nice things, like over and over. And in this the simple way that you usually instill, rules and expectations with children, where you say the first part of the sentence and then she'll finish it. So she knows. She's aware of the fact that she's not supposed to, and it is dangerous for her to interact with these things, but it's still happening. So just terror. I go back into my room at this point with her because I figure, okay, instead of just talking at the window, now it's gone a step further, and somehow these things are beckoning her outside. And if she hadn't stepped on the right board walking down the hallway to make the loud enough creak because of how small she is, I never would have known that she was trying to open the door. And who knows, maybe she could have gotten the door open. I don't know. But I didn't want to leave that to chance, so I put her in the bed with my wife and the baby and I, all four of us crammed in there, and do my best to go back to sleep. About an hour and a half goes by. The kids are sound asleep. I'm wide awake, obviously, both what had happened previously, where she's trying to go outside, and then just mulling this over in my head. What is going on? How is this happening? And then we start hearing the thud, scratch, thud, the normal, ripping around the house, making all kinds of noise. And then it sort of abruptly stops just right around the corner of the house from where our bedroom is. And my wife just so happens to be waking up, kind of hearing noises, and she sits up on one edge of her arm facing towards me, which is toward the window, and she sees the clear as day full front of the larger brown, gray, more coyote, wolf shaded Dogman, the larger one, and screams, shrieks, and it growls. She said it smiled and then launches itself up the hill, the same way that it did previously when I drew my pistol. The next morning, I'm questioning my daughter. Why did you get out of your bed? What were you thinking you're doing? And she doesn't remember anything other than me carrying her from the kitchen back into our bedroom, which reinforces that pit in the stomach, really, really anxiety-inducing feeling of, okay, she's not even aware of the fact that this thing's trying to take her outside. And again, if she wouldn't have made that little bit of noise, I never would have known, and she could have been gone. So I go and I talk to my parents in the morning again and let them know what happened. And at this point in time, after a little over a month, close to 6 weeks of my stepdad hearing all of these reports from us, he's enraged now that I'm involving my daughter in my fairy tales and fantasies, and that I'm going to do damage to her, that I'm going to scar her for life and mess up her perception of reality by encouraging her to make up stories about trying to go play with a werewolf. And it just, in a normal situation where it's something simple, somebody questioning your parenting is aggravating. In a situation where there is something dangerous in your eyes and maybe not in somebody else's, it's maddening. And then in a situation where you know what you're seeing, you know the situation, but the other person still is questioning your parenting. It's infuriating. I'm of the mind you can say what you want, you can think what you want, it doesn't matter to me, but as soon as you start questioning my motivation or my capabilities as a father, as a parent, we have some big problems. So at that point in time, I, got up in a huff and yelled back at him, well, if you don't believe it, why don't we trade rooms for the night? Why don't you come and see what it is that's happening? And, oh, yeah, you guys just want our new bed. You're just, again, blowing us off. So the next weekend after that, we go back up, and I'm determined at this point to have my stepdad come face to face with one of these things. And I don't wish the encounter on anyone because of how unnerving, how frightening, how terrifying it is to be in such close proximity to one of these things. But he's gone too far, I guess you could say, with the questioning, with the undermining, with cruelty. I mean, needless cruelty. So we're all getting ready to go to bed a little bit earlier than usual. And I'd back up just a little bit. That weekend when we came up, I had purchased some blackout curtains to replace the sort of sheer ones where you could see through either from the outside in or inside out in our room, and the same thing in my daughter's room. So there was no way that one of these things was going to be able to see in again, and we're not going to have to be subject to seeing it personally. We're going to sleep. The standard routine that they've adopted at this point, where they're scratching the house, banging on windows, is going on. But there's kind of a gap or a break in the noise. And right as I'm expecting to hear something bang on the side of the house or crash against a window like it's been, I hear really super loud, heavy falling footsteps coming down the hall inside the house. And this, like I said, I've gone back and I've listened to a lot of the episodes, Vic, that you've done since, trying to understand, what I went through, what it was I was experiencing, and there's also something cathartic about knowing that you're not alone in this kind of experience, that there are lots of other people who have dealt with similar circumstances, and just trying to get whatever more information I can get as to what these things are, where they came from, what their motivations are outside of just wanting to scare you. So I'd heard of one of the episodes where the man you were interviewing, I forget the number, but he had a Dogman actually come inside his house. And so that's immediately what pops into my mind. I didn't lock a door, or I didn't close a window all the way. I made a mistake, and somehow this thing has made its way inside the house. And it's between now me and my daughter's room. So it's given up on trying to get her to come out. It's now decided I'm going to go in and get her. So I quickly, as quickly as humanly possible, grab the pistol from the bedside table, grab the flashlight, throw the door open, expecting to get a full view of this Dogman that we've been seeing, and there's nothing there. Not like see something go around the corner, or see something poke into my daughter's room, or my brother or stepdad or somebody playing a trick trying to scare us because they know that we're already freaked out, but nothing. Just empty hallway, no lights on, but I know what I heard. I heard these footsteps. I step out of the doorway into the hallway. I look to my left, which is where my daughter's room is. The door is still shut and closed in a way where if she opens it or comes out, there's a little metal latch piece that falls down, so you can tell if she's come out or something's gone in, and it's still the way that it was. And as I'm getting ready to turn around to go back into my room, I hear the same heavy falling footsteps, like thundering footsteps. I mean, you could hear it all through the house, going down the stairs to the lower level, the ground level, where the driveway is. So I quietly go around, down the hallway, around the corner, into the kitchen, and right across from where the back door is where this staircase is that leads downstairs. So I open the door quietly and as slowly as I can so it doesn't squeak or creak, and I turn on the light at the same time. And on my walk to the door to the downstairs, I'm hearing the bathroom door that's in the basement fling open and slam closed, and fling open and slam closed. And then as I'm rounding the corner and opening the door, I hear the door to the crawl space, which is essentially attached to the staircase, on the right-hand side as you're looking down. It's flinging open, hitting the dresser that's next to it, and slamming closed. Flinging open and slamming closed. You can hear it echoing off the wood. And as I turn on the light and I look down the staircase, there's nothing there, but the door is still swinging back and forth violently. And right as I'm about to take a step to go down the stairs and see what the heck is going on, the smaller, darker colored, more stubby-faced Dogman runs up behind me and slams hands and I think face against the back door and growls really loud. And I'm not expecting it, so I scream some real choice words, yell, "Get out of here, why are you doing this to us?" And I know that it's irrational, but I swear, Vic, that this thing smiled at me. Like, I got what I wanted, I got you good. And I jumped out of my skin. Your focus is solely forward, and then, like in a movie, a jump scare happens and there's something right behind you. It terrifying, as frightful as anything can possibly be. So at that point in time now, we're not just dealing with the out of the ordinary of having close proximity encounters with dogmen that for whatever reason are stuck on coming to this property and messing with us. Now there's something going on inside the house that I have no way of explaining. I don't know why or how, but it's terrifying in its own right. So we do our best to try and make sense of it, my wife and I, next morning, because she heard the footsteps down the stairs. She heard the doors slamming downstairs. And then she heard the slam up against the window on the back door and the growl, and heard me screaming. And I presume everybody else in the house did, but what was going on, what happened, I explained what I heard and what I saw. And, we again come to the conclusion now things are on a whole nother level of freaky, something that we're not prepared for or equipped for. We can't even deal with our first, the Dogman problem, and now we've got something completely different going on. We can't have our kids in this environment. It's going to frighten them so bad that they're scarred. They're going to never want to go to the mountains. We're going to ruin the outdoors. All of these are the thoughts that are going through our head, just wanting more than anything to protect our kids, shelter our kids from all of this. So we'd already driven all the way up there, and it's about a 2-hour drive from where we live down near Denver. So we decide, we're only here for one more night. We have the curtains, so even if they want to do their thing outside, we won't see them. They can't see into Abby's room anymore. There's no way that can happen. So let's just make the best of this last day, and then have that be sort of the end of it for us, for the season. And hopefully next year they'll go on their way and find somebody else to terrorize. So like clockwork, 2:30 in the morning, they're running around the house, slapping walls, banging on windows. And then this night, the cupboards in the kitchen start slamming on their own, which at this point I've seen all I need to see of that nonsense. So I'm not going to leave the room to see what's going on. The cupboards can slam all they want to their heart's content. I'm not leaving the room. I'm not going to deal with it again. I felt at that point in time somehow, because of how readily the smaller one was able to terrify me while this was going on, somehow maybe they were connected still to this day. I don't know for sure, but I'm not leaving the room. About maybe 35, 40 seconds after the cupboards stop slamming, a rock flies through the window on the back door, smashing the glass. Rock hits against the door to the basement, falls to the ground. And that, I mean, everybody wakes up from that. Anytime there's solitude or quiet or relatively so, and then a window gets shattered, you're going to react to it. I was the first to get to where the rock was, and I see up on the hill, about 20, 25 feet from the house, both of the dogmen standing sort of half crouched. There's a whole bunch of like scrub bushes and yucca plants that proceed up the hill from where we are, and they're sort of behind those, kind of crouched down, but you can tell that they're looking at what was just done to the window. And the next person into the room is my stepdad. So I'm like, okay, cool, perfect. I can show him what he's been making fun of us for this whole time. And I tell him, look up the hill. And I point the flashlight that I have, pretty powerful light, on the exact spot where they just were, and there's nothing there. So I'm like, great. Now I'm going to be looked at as an even crazier person. And now he thinks that somebody was trying to break into the house, that this was a person that, broke the door with a rock. And this rock it's no pebble, right? When I picked it up, I estimated the weight probably around 35 pounds. So in order to throw this thing with any sort of distance, you'd have to be either Arnold Schwarzenegger or a Dogman. Like you're not going to get that kind of distance on something that heavy as an average strength, average sized person. So we help during that next morning before we head back home. We help my parents put like the child-proof latch locks on all the cupboards so the slamming doesn't happen anymore. And a little bit before this, we'd started making sort of like wooden shutters for all of the windows because we were afraid something like this was going to happen. One of the windows was going to get broken out because, they're running by and smacking these things, and it sounds like they're about to give out. These aren't new windows. The house is over 100 years old, so some of the glass is about that age. So we wanted an additional layer of security or safety. So we start, after we finish with the cupboards, I'm outside with the drill, and my stepdad helping him mount all of these shutter deals that we'd made to the outside of the house so that we can hopefully try and protect some of the glass. We board up the door, and we say our goodbyes, and me and my family leave because even though I had the ability, because of work schedule, or lack thereof, I should say, I had the ability to be able to stay for another night. I didn't want any part of it. There's no resting while I'm there, even during the day. Since I've kind of double-edged sword, since I've heard these other interactions that people have had, some of it even happens in broad daylight. So in the back of my mind, even though it's at daytime, I'm thinking, oh, it's right around the corner. They're going to come. They're going to do what they want. So that it's not enjoyable in any way to be there. So we're heading back down. My mom gives me a call right as we're getting into a town called Lyons, which is between Estes Park and Boulder on Highway 36. And she apologizes because, again, the conversation that was being had between me and my stepdad was not kind the entire time we're doing this work on the outside of the house with the shutters. We have the blackout curtains installed. We have the shutters installed. We have the latches on the cupboard. So in my eyes, it's as close to safe as it can be until these things decide to go away. We're not going to go back up there with our kids, but my folks and whoever they want to invite, they can have it and enjoy it. And hopefully things won't be too terribly terrifying for them. She apologizes, like I said, for what my stepdad had said, and just kind of few words of encouragement. Don't let it bother you. I know that you're telling the truth. I've seen it. I've dealt with it. I thought that the national park was really going to help us. She made the comment, and I agree that it's like things got more aggressive as far as the trying to get under our skin once she called the park rangers out and they set up all those traps. And I mean, like I said, I agree. I think it went to a whole nother level as soon as we, instead of just trying to ignore it and waiting for it to go away, we're trying to actively do something to either dissuade them from being there or in a sort of passive way fight back. But they ended up staying up there another night, and as fate would have it, that night my mom had, she bought herself some noise canceling headphones to wear while she slept and a mask so that even if these things are right outside, she'd essentially become of the mind, if they're going to come in and get me, they're going to get me. There's nothing I'm going to do, but I'm done being scared, and I'm done not being able to enjoy this property that's been in my family for all these years. And because she doesn't have kids, that's perfectly acceptable. So she doesn't hear anything. She can't hear it, but my stepdad is woken up. He said probably about 4:00, and the shutters that we had installed on the kitchen window are being attacked, is what he said. Like they're moving back and forth a good 3 inches in and out, and he sees claws coming underneath the slats as they're being shaken. So he creeps up on it and flicks the little lever that's keeping them held closed, and they get torn back and ripped off. And there, right in front of him, with no way for him to be able to now deny it, is the smaller of the two dogmen, with the bigger one probably about 15, 20 feet behind it on the hill, right on the other side of the window, 3 feet from him. And the words that he used to describe his physical reaction to what had happened, I'm not going to repeat, but suffice to say there was an involuntary bodily reaction, if you catch my drift. And he ran away screaming like a little girl. And these are his words, not mine. But he, as soon as it was a reasonable time in the morning, I got a phone call from him, hysterical almost, borderline frantic, definitely, but borderline hysterical. I'm so sorry. I saw what you guys were talking about. I know that I should have believed you. I'm sorry that I didn't do more to help protect the girls. Taking on a lot of blame for himself for the continued occurrence of these things coming around, feeling guilty that somehow if he would have done more to help us, or at least believed us, we could have put our heads together and come up with something, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, a little bit of just desserts. And like I said, I wouldn't wish one of these interactions or encounters on anybody, even my worst enemy, because it's terrifying. I've never felt smaller. I've never felt more powerless. I've never felt less capable of protecting myself and my family as when I'm face to face with one of these gigantic dogmen. And he finally felt the gravity of that. So as unfortunate as the situation is, having to encounter it, I felt like, okay, now maybe we'll get some real support here. Maybe we'll get another brain and another couple sets of eyes on this, and hopefully we'll maybe be able to come up with something to where we can start to utilize my family's property again. The thing that really kind of sent him over the edge and let him know that what we're dealing with is not just some unidentified wild animal that was living deep in the park is that morning, after the shutters were ripped off, all of the traps that the national park had come out and set up had been ripped out of the ground, because they're laid out and set, but then also staked down so that if something gets caught in it, it's not going to run off with a trap on it and then either suffer for an extended period of time or hurt itself or another animal needlessly. So every single one of these traps, probably about 15 of them, had been ripped up out of the ground and placed in front of the front door that leads to the dining room kitchen area on the upper level, and then also the door that leads into the downstairs section. They're laid out flat without being tripped, all in front of both of these doors. And obviously neither him or my mom went outside and moved a bunch of coyote traps and what looks like small bear traps in the middle of the night. He I think rightfully attributed it to the Dogmen because they're doing everything they can to scare us half to death, and I don't think that there's much more that can be more unnerving or more of a display of both strength and intelligence than moving and then placing down of animal traps in a way where they're not triggered, and then also that if you were not wittingly opening the door and stepping outside, where you would have gotten a foot full of coyote trap first thing in the morning. So it's been a whirlwind, I think would be putting it mildly. We're at the point now where we definitely don't want to have anything get worse. We don't want to directly confront them in any sort of violent way, because even just passively confronting them with the traps has made things worse. So it's gotten to the point where my mom and my stepdad, they're not going up there anymore, or at least haven't been for the past week, 2 weeks. And I'm definitely not taking my family up there anytime soon. And since the camera system that I installed is really low tech and really outdated, there's no way for me to monitor the situation from home. But until we can get a handle on this situation, we're essentially been run off of our own property, and it's sad. It makes you angry in a way that you're bitter, or I feel bitter, at least, that I've done everything I know to do. Cameras didn't work. Traps obviously just made things worse. The shutters being put up, especially in a place where they could grab them, and I hadn't thought of this before, but Vic, you had mentioned placing them on the inside. Much smarter idea, but all of these steps that we took to try and mitigate the sheer terror of living with Dogman encounters constantly, is none of it's worked. So we're kind of at a loss until we can get a handle on it, like I said.
What's been harder for you to deal with, Matt? The dogmen harassing you on the outside of the home, or the strange activity inside of it?
It's really difficult to quantify it either way, because it is equally terrifying, I feel. The dogmen on the outside, I guess silver lining there is, if they wanted to, they absolutely have the capability of doing whatever they want, coming in the house, taking whoever they want and running off, or maiming you or eating you. Whatever, they could do it. But the unexplainable paranormal stuff on the inside, that's a whole nother level, where there isn't anything physically there. So that's eerie, but not quite as terrifying as seeing something that is as physically foreboding and intimidating as a dogman. But still, regardless, the added layer in this terror sandwich of having paranormal activity happening, it's definitely not a welcoming experience. Not something that I want to have to endure or have my kids be around.
Well, no, yeah, you wouldn't wish that on anyone. From what I understand, you asked your wife if she'd be interested in speaking with me. What'd she say when you did that?
She said that essentially she was of the mind that she wanted to ignore it, for lack of a better term. She thought that, in her words, giving it any energy, any thought, putting it out there, quote unquote, in the universe, was only going to bring things back 10 times worse and make things get worse. And I, as best as I could, tried to convince her that, that's not really how this works. And, I'm definitely not an expert. I definitely don't have as much knowledge or experience in this department as you do, Vic. But from what we've talked about, and then from what I've experienced personally, being able to, one, talk to somebody about it who knows, number one, that these things happen, and number two, kind of sort of the nature of things, that it's not just it's not like in the movies where the werewolf is just waiting for you to come around the corner and it's going to tear you apart. They're the Grinch trying to scare you half to death. But to no avail. She didn't want anything to do with talking to you or an interview or anything along those lines. And I think it's unfortunate because some of the insights she had, some of the feelings that she experienced from a mother's point of view, I felt were valuable, where somebody else out there it's valuable. Her opinion, her experience, it's valuable. And if she shared it, it could possibly help somebody. But obviously, I'm not going to push the issue. If she changes her mind, I'll absolutely pass along your contact information to her, and hopefully she'll come around. But it's kind of sort of this similar. She has a similar attitude as my mom, and I kind of have a feeling that the two of them have been, while either I'm at work or doing whatever with the kids, they're having their own conversations where, because of some of the key things that they said when I've talked to them, they're of the mind to ignore it. Like, as I said, my mom just got some noise canceling headphones and a mask to not have to see or hear anything that's going on outside. So, I mean, while ignoring the problem can help, I think at this point, because there's definitely more than one, possibly even more. I mean, I don't know. And they haven't moved on. It's been a couple of months, and they haven't found a new game to play, so to speak. I don't think that just outright ignoring it without doing anything preventative is really the best way to go about handling it.
So ignore it and hopefully it'll go away. Yeah, that doesn't work. Please make sure she knows that she wouldn't have to come on the show if she wants to speak with me about all this. After all, most eyewitnesses I speak with don't even go public with their encounters, so that wouldn't be a problem. You mentioned your wife having a mother's point of view. Would you say dealing with them has been harder for you as your family's protector or your wife?
I think that it's probably, it's difficult to quantify, Vic, as I'm sure you understand, but it's difficult in its own way. So I'm kind of explain what I mean by that. From my point of view, as you said, from the protector, from the father's point of view, not being able to stop these really scary events from happening, and then take that a step further and not being able to do much to stop whatever they're attempting with my oldest daughter, not being able to stop that, and it happening without me knowing, that's a level of I don't want to say defeat because it isn't my fault, but kind of that sort of type of feeling where almost hopelessness. I've done all that I can do and it's not good enough. But then on the flip side of that, my wife's point of view, she's no G.I. Jane. So she used to really enjoy a whole lot about, just like I have, a lot of outdoor activity, hiking, especially with the kids. Like while I'm at work and doing my thing, she'd take our kids out into the mountains and go hiking by herself. And she never had any fear about that. She never had any reservations about it. But since all of this has started, since there's a whole species of animal that is a lot smarter, a lot bigger, and a lot meaner than anything that we thought existed previously, it's stopped her from enjoying the outdoors in a way that she used to on a very regular basis. So I'm sure that she feels a lot of that same kind of defeatist feeling or mentality.
Wow, this is so hard to deal with. It would be one thing if you just had to deal with the dogman on the outside of the home, but the fact that you've got this paranormal activity going on in the inside, yeah, that is just too much. Like I told you before, if you decide that you'd like to have some help out there, whether with the dogman encounters on the outside or with what's going on inside the home, just let me know. Say the word, and yeah, I can send people out there to try and help.
Yeah, I really, really appreciate that, Vic. I'm going to do the best that I can to convince the parties involved, because we're out of ideas ourselves. We've done all that we can, and I think that the logical next step is to get a subject matter expert, somebody who either has experience dealing with this, or at very least more information than we do. It can't hurt. So yeah, if I find out that that's a possibility, or that's something that they're willing to have happen, because as I've mentioned previously, it's not just my home up there. It's not just my property. It belongs to our family. If I can have that happen, I definitely want that kind of help.
Well, if after talking with them about that, if they green light having the help come in, then yeah, just like I said, let me know and I'll see that through. Would you say the worst aspect of having to deal with all that was trying to keep Abby from going outside with them or letting them in, or would you say it was something else?
It's without a doubt the component of all of this that has to deal with my daughter. The fact that when she was at the back door, either trying to let them in or get out, that she was not conscious of what was happening, that she had no recollection of it. When I asked her about it the next morning, that was, as I stated previously, that's a whole nother level of terrifying. That's the parent's worst nightmare. That they make movies and TV shows about how terrifying and tragic that is to wake up and have your child just gone. And I don't understand what they would want with a 3-year-old little girl. It's a lot to try and deal with. It's difficult to maintain that non-aggressive posture or stance. It's difficult to not just want to sit up on the roof with a high-powered rifle and wait for him to show up and take care of it the old-fashioned way. But speaking to yourself and then also Cody, the individual that you put me in contact with, that's the absolute worst thing you can do is become aggressive to them. And it's just kind of that darned if you do, darned if you don't, rock and hard place.
Yeah, that is a really tough situation. Well, it's about time for us to get out of here, Matt, but before we do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
If anything, just kind of reiterate what I had said during the first episode, that being able to come on and share these experiences to make people aware. I mean, awareness really is the good thing, the silver lining, I should say, out of this experience, is I can offer some awareness to people in one of the highest traffic tourist locations in the state. And especially now that, like I've said, that things are opening back up and the lockdowns and such are being lifted somewhat, people are out more. People are back up into the mountains. They're camping, they're fishing, they're hiking, and just being aware that not only are dogmen out there, but there are things you can do to mitigate the risk of coming into a bad situation with one of them. I feel like it's almost a duty that I have. Make people aware of what's happening out there so that hopefully, whether it's somebody else with small kids or just somebody out hiking or fishing on their own, that they aren't caught off guard, that they aren't caught unaware, and maybe something worse than just being scared happens.
Well, it's awfully admirable that you've got those concerns. Says a lot about your character. I'm really impressed. But having said all that, thanks again so much for coming on and sharing those recent experiences with us, and have a great night. If you've had a Dogman encounter of your own and would like to speak with me, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you.